Good afternoon. You got to turn the microphone on. Good afternoon. It's News Radio 1029 KARN. My name is Brad Schmidt. This is The Schmidt Show. I am your host. And we're glad you're here. Spending a little bit of time with us this afternoon. It's Free Speech Friday. Anything you want to talk about today is fair game. We'll talk about all of it, any of it, none of it, whatever you decide. Monday through Thursday, I am the benevolent dictator that determines the direction of the show. On Fridays, I turn the reins over to my loyal subjects and allow you to determine the course of the discussion, the course of the conversation throughout the show. So, of course, there's a lot to talk about. If you don't have any ideas, don't know what you want to talk about, there are some things we can jump into. Of course, the big news of the week, this bridge collapse in Maryland. General Mike Flynn came out and said it is a black swan event. Now, many people have dived on that and have accused General Flynn of being some crazy conspiracy theorist, and he's a nut job. And see, this is proof that all the conservatives are a bunch of idiots and they're crazy and blah, blah, blah. Anytime you see people piling on to someone when they make a statement about this kind of stuff, you can be rest assured that that there might be something to hide, that they might be upset about something. Now, I've said several times, I don't think this is a conspiracy. I think this is purely just an accident. I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing to admit if I'm wrong, and I will gladly do so if more information comes out. But as of now, it does really appear as if it was an accidental event. There were multiple emergency calls put out. We are now finding out that the information was that the pilots of the ship, because the captain wasn't the one actually captaining the ship or guiding it through the port. It was an American pilot, as per the Jones Act. But they did send out calls and ask the tugboats to be scrambled in an attempt to divert the ship, but they simply were not fast enough, because I watched the one description of it, the one breakdown analysis of it by the casual navigation guy. The tugboats generally help them get out and away from the dock and the port, and then to kind of help guide them into the channel. But once they are safely into the channel and are away from the risk of running aground and that sort of stuff, the tugboats then usually break off and go back to their stations wherever they were. And as soon as the ship lost power, the tugboats were immediately scrambled, and at the time of the collision, were heading toward the ship at literal full speed. They were, balls out, going for it, trying to get there as quickly as possible. But it was simply too late. They could not get there in time. So I really don't think this was any sort of conspiracy event or an attack or anything like that. And to defend General Flynn, it's important to point out that the term black swan event is not necessarily a conspiracy type term. The term, or the phrase, black swan event actually goes back to a paper that was written, or an essay written by a guy named Nassim Nicholas Taleb, or Talib, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He is a Lebanese American. He's a statistician and a writer. And he used the phrase to describe unforeseen happenings in the financial world, things that have oftentimes cascading or sequential consequences because of the single event. And he uses in his essay, he uses the example of the 2000 .com crash. Later on in some of his other writings, he went on to kind of extend or develop the metaphor in the context of basically any historical or significant national security events. So it's not really a conspiracy theory term. And General Flynn is absolutely dead on correct that this would be a black swan event in that original understanding of the term as it was coined by this statistician, this writer. And the reason it is a legitimate discussion is because we've all, for the last few years. I mean, other than COVID and some of those kind of things, right? We've all been kind of tooling along. We've kind of recovered somewhat in the supply chain issue stuff, and it doesn't take 6 months to get parts anymore and things like that. And so we're tooling along. The economy's doing its thing, and the automotive industry is doing its thing, and the shortage of cars has kind of calmed down, and the price of used vehicles has come back to somewhat normal ranges and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, blammo, ship crashes into a bridge in the Baltimore port. Bridge falls in the ocean. Economic upset all around the world because of it. And now there's some more of these cascading consequences or piling on of consequences because some shipping companies are saying, yeah, we'll divert the cargo to other ports, but we're not going to be responsible for getting it back to Baltimore or to anywhere else that it is going. That's going to be on the shipper. That's not our problem. We just deliver it. We're just the shipping company, and we put it on our cargo ships. We get it off the cargo ships, and we leave. After that, your problem, not ours. We're moving on. And there's going to be some significant financial cost that comes to that. I mean, think about it. If you order a car for your dealership in Maine, and it gets delivered to a port in Maryland, and there's a cost in getting it from Maryland to Maine, and it's not a lot because they're semi-close, but there is some cost. But now if that ship has to divert, say, all the way down to Dallas or Houston, somewhere down in Florida, it suddenly became exponentially more expensive to get it to its final destination from the port. So that's another one of those cascading consequences. And nobody really at fault by it. There's no conspiracy about it. It just is what it is. That's the thing. So General Flynn is absolutely correct in describing this as a black swan event. It doesn't mean it has to be some sort of conspiratorial attack on the national security and sovereignty of the United States or some global effort to undermine what we're doing here in the United States or whatever. It is literally, according to the original understanding of the metaphor as it was developed by the guy who came up with the idea, it is a black swan event. It is a surprising, unforeseen event that kind of came out of nowhere. No one, I bet if you had laid odds in Vegas betting on the fact that last Tuesday, a ship would crash into the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland, and I'm guessing nobody would have made any money on that bet because nobody would have made that bet, right? I mean, nobody would have expected that. Yet, as General Flynn says, here we are. It is now a thing, and we've got to deal with it. So I am not on board that this is a conspiracy or some sort of an attack or anything like that. Now, is it possible? Absolutely. Right? I mean, one of the things, and I'll get into this today, we'll talk a little bit about hijacking the electronics in these various vehicles and vessels, from airplanes and ships all the way down to your car, your Tesla or your Cybertruck or even your Jeep Grand Cherokee. It is absolutely possible to hack into them and take some level of control over them. And is that a possibility? Certainly it is. No question about it. Is it likely? In my mind, I don't think so. But we'll get into it. It's a Free Speech Friday. If it's something you want to talk about, we'll definitely we'll chase those rabbit holes all day long. Of course, the border crisis. The border crisis is expanding. It is no longer just a southern border crisis, according to the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol and the Canadian border people. The Swanton Sector Border Patrol at the northern border says that they have apprehended more illegal crossers in this fiscal year so far than in the entire last 12 years combined. So the border crisis is expanding. We'll talk a little bit about that. I don't mind even talking about today some of the crazy that is going on between Steven Crowder and Candace Owens and Daily Wire and all of the now Jared Monroe, one of Steven Crowder's famous or former producers. The lawsuits there and more bad news for Steven Crowder. So we'll get into some of that as well. Candace Owens, of course, being fired by Daily Wire. So we can even talk about all of that. There's a lot to get into today because it is Free Speech Friday, so anything you want to talk about is fair game. And if you've been watching us on the video, on either our Twitter page, on our YouTube page, or on our actual website, you're going to have to follow us over to the broadcast and keep listening and give us a call, weigh in on whatever we're talking about, or simply change the subject to something you want to talk about. It's all coming up next on News Radio 102.9 KRN and the KRN app.